You're listening to the Intentional Parents Podcast, brought to you by Intentional. Intentional is all about spiritual formation in the family. We desire to bring biblical hope and practical help. Enjoy this week's conversation. Welcome back to the Intentional Parents Podcast. We are coming from the Motherhood Retreat 2024, our first live podcast ever with 800 ladies in the room. Ladies, would you like to make some noise? Yes. Whoa. So this is a little bit different. It's going to be live. I'm here with Elizabeth and Diane and Phil, and this is our first live experience, but we're happy to go on this journey with everybody listening and all the ladies in the room. Also today, you're going to hear another voice. We've never done this, but we're going to hand over the hosting position of today's podcast to our friend, my dear friend, Joey Odom of RO. Joey, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for guest hosting.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. I have a question for you. Is this hard for you? You're letting go of the reins a little bit.
Dude, I'm always trying to release control. It's good.
It's a lot of trust. There's a lot of trust for a man in his mid-40s with long hair. That's a lot of trust you're giving me.
It is, but we're happy to have you. And I also want to just say today, these questions are going to be coming from the specific ladies in this room who've been processing a ton. But here's what we know. There's been more than 200 or 300, I think, I can't even count, questions that came in. And so what we did for the questions for this retreat is we tried to figure out what are some themes. So we might not answer your exact specific question, but what we will do is try to answer or respond to questions that are a part of the theme. So that's how we collected those. And I really also trust if you're listening to this and you are wondering like, well, it's not my question. These questions will touch your life if you're a human. So I think it's for everybody listening. So Joey, take it, bro.
Well, hey, the questions that came in, there were some very deep, rich questions, and it really started. I want to just dive in, if that's okay. And Elizabeth, I want to start with you. And this goes to probably like the soul of a lot of women. And the question is, can you give us a hair tutorial?
Oh my gosh. Well, okay.
That's submitted by Joey O. Submitted that question.
There you go. Oh man, I can't give you a hair tutorial.
Wow.
Actually, that's a funny question because what a lot of you don't know is I lost a lot of my hair over the last couple years, like 70% of it. And I've been so insecure about being in front of all of you. But it's growing back, praise Jesus, but I can't give you a hair tutorial. Sorry.
Wow. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to try to start losing their hair to look as good as yours. That's fantastic. Okay, so another question. This is a follow-up question. Friday morning, you had a dynamite shirt, and we need to know where it's from.
Oh, my gosh. I can't even remember. Aritzia. There we go.
Well, we heard Nance, what was it?
Aritzia.
Mm-hmm. That is a Canadian blessed company.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means in any way. Okay, so now the serious stuff's out of the way.
Okay,
we can have some fun.
right.
No, I do want to start. I want to start with Brooke. Brooke, you talked about this concept of care before criticism.
Oh,
and so I would love to hear. Will you give us a couple of examples of what care before criticism, how that shows up?
Yes, for context, if anyone listening, I shared a passage on Proverbs 31 at a motherhood retreat. If that doesn't sound dangerous, I don't know what is. So that did happen, and maybe someday we'll release that somewhere so you can have context. But yes, one of the points was when we bring care before criticism, it's a blessing, but criticism before care is crushing. And specifically as spouses, the idea is that a lot of the times we end up wanting to naturally just bring criticism before the care. And it's honestly easier to bring criticism than it is to bring care. It's a lot of work to bring care a lot of the time. So I could just speak from our experience. That's all I can say. I would say for me personally, ways that Elizabeth cares for me is by noting that I'm having a moment, noting that I'm responding wrong, noting that all these things are happening that are not what she would hope for me to be doing. And for her to honestly in that moment kind of absorb some of it or ignore some of it. I'm like a child that way. Like if you ignore me, I'll kind of just chill a little bit. So she'll just kind of ignore it, and she doesn't make a big deal about my responses. And then she'll often just come and say, okay, well, it seems like you're feeling a lot about that. And almost like neutral. It's almost the care doesn't need to be like overly done, or I need to be coddled, or my emotions need to have all of this time. It's just honestly giving me some space and then caring in an almost non-emotional way. That's really helpful. So she asks questions, she's curious. I think curiosity without judgment is really hard, but that's really healing too. So whenever she's curious, like, I wonder why you're so frustrated at the end of this day. What was your day? What's been happening in your day? What interactions did you have at work? What are you struggling with mentally or emotionally? Those are types of questions that make me feel like care. And then I'm just willing to go so much deeper and be like, oh yeah, well, this happened and that happened. And this kind of bothered me. And your dad said that again. And I'm just kidding. I'm really processing it. He just won't stop saying it. I don't know what to do. I'm kidding. We have the kind of relationship that I would just tell Phil to his face, and we do. But anyway, yeah, I think that kind of stuff is very helpful.
Elizabeth, I have a question related to that. And you joked about it, Brooke, but there is some real truth in it, in treating your husband at times like a child, in like needing to like guide him by the hand. That's something, Elizabeth, I think as a wife, it feels like I shouldn't have to like. It's like, it feels like you shouldn't have to do that, right? Like, can't he just be a grown up and receive this criticism? What is any, does that resonate? Got a lot of notes out there. So, but that is, in some ways, that is a fact of the matter, that sometimes you need to come down to a lower level. Is that a difficult thing for your pride to be able to offer that care before criticism?
Yeah, it's super hard for me. And I did it really wrong for, I would say, most of our marriage. This is like a new thing that I am learning. I had an expectation that he would respond in a certain way based off of how I think things should be responded to. You don't even realize that you have these expectations. And so for me, I had to wrestle a lot of anger. Like, he should know what he's doing and how to respond the right way, right? But in realizing, I think our husbands carry more shame than oftentimes they let on. Wow. Yeah. And I think oftentimes it's presented as just defensiveness, or aggression feels like too strong of a word, but just a lot of energy with that defensiveness. And I would just clap right back with my own anger. And in recognizing when I can just slow down, when I cannot say anything at first, like he's talking about, knowing he's already hearing himself. He's a godly man who loves Jesus, who wants to get it right. And just remembering that most of your husbands are likely well-intended. And so often we treat them as if they're evil and they're not well-intended in that moment. But when I can take a minute and say, hey, I am not mad at you. This is not shameful. I understand why you're not responding the way I know you want to right now. You're tired. You've had a long day. I think you need to take a minute, but that's not me saying that I'm mad at you or trying to shame you. Like, he needs that reminder. And I think oftentimes our husbands don't present as if they need that reminder. But I also think if we can, when there's not stuff happening, when there isn't something right in the moment that we're feeling like we need to give some constructive criticism to, ask your husbands, like, what is helpful when I approach you? Do you want it to be just like matter of fact? Do you need it to be more gentle and more emotion? Like, likely your husband will be able to tell you if you're able to just ask him and give him a few ways what's helpful in how I communicate with you and what is really not helpful and you just shut me out.
I'll let all the ladies in on a secret, and I really do mean this. And this gets me emotional thinking about it because I think it's such a deep truth. We as men want so badly to be your heroes. We want it so badly inside of us. And I would encourage you, as you're talking to your husband, to speak to your husband as if he's the man you would like for him to be versus the man you see in that moment. Because when you do that, he'll become more like that man. I promise you. And I'm curious, Phil, I would love to hear from you throughout your marriage. How is this when it comes to conflict, when you, and I know you don't need much correction, but if you ever did, what has been most effective for Diane in presenting to you, hey, here's something I need from you, Phil. Here's a little bit of an adjustment I need from you.
What? Yeah, I love this. Tell me.
She doesn't know what I'm going to say. She goes, I love this. Tell me.
I'm learning so much.
Yep.
I would have I'm learning so much. I would have really liked this conversation about 20 or 30 years ago. This is really good.
What helps the most is when she's kind. And I think you ladies would say, what helps me the most is when my husband is kind, right? Diane and I have been talking about kindness, like we want to talk about it more and write about it more. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. Jesus is kind. He's the good shepherd. And we know he's kind. And whenever he disciplines us, we feel his love. And so I think when Diane is able to approach me and tell me the truth, the Bible also says speak the truth in love. And I think, really in the last couple years, I'm learning how to treat her with more tenderness and kindness. There's an old song from my parents' era. My mom was a musician. I used to sit as the little boy next to her in the piano, and she would play all these songs from the 40s, and I just loved it, And one was a song called Try a Little Tenderness. And so I've noticed that when I'm tender with her, her heart opens up. But I think when she's tender with me, my heart opens up. Instead of saying, how many times have I told you, don't speak to me that way, or whatever it might be. So, so I don't know, that's my answer, basically.
Yeah.
I think we all are longing to be loved. And the love of God can flow through us to one another. But we have to put on Jesus Christ. It says in Romans, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh. You got up this morning and we all got dressed. Thank you, God. But in the morning, you put on Jesus Christ, and when you put him on, you put on what we call the fruit of the Spirit: love, gentleness, patience, kindness. And I think when we are able to do that. And then the other thing that helps is when either one of us blows it, ask forgiveness. And the other thing we've learned is if you do have a tense moment and one of you says, I just need a little space, the one that says, I need a little space, needs to be the one to come back.
That's good.
Okay. Diane doesn't like it if I'm chasing her around. Come on, let's finish this conversation. She needs some time to process, but then she needs to be the one to come back. And I think that's helped us too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my answer.
Beautifully answers it. And I would encourage, I know we have a room full of ladies here, but we have, on the podcast, we have a lot of fellas listening. That same advice, I think, we've said it goes the other way, is just treating with the fruit of the Spirit that has come up, and you mentioned it, Phil, over the last few years for me, is gentleness, of just the power of gentleness, of putting a hand on her arm and letting her know we're on the same team, as opposed to just wanting so badly to impose your will. It's just like, how can we make this productive? So that is wonderful. Diane, I want to go to another question for you, and this is a deep question. This really is, and this comes from someone who says, I lost a baby a year ago, and sometimes I feel unseen by Jesus. How do I recognize Jesus in that?
I think we sang a song this morning. I'm not good at remembering songs, but there was a song that we were singing about hope.
Hold on to hope.
Hold on to hope. I think sometimes we have to recognize as women that our emotions are not always trustworthy. And if we believe the truest truth is how I feel in the moment, then we can be easily deceived, especially by an enemy who's doing everything he can to separate you from the love of Christ, especially in a moment when you need that love more than you've ever needed it before. And we have a choice in those moments. We either turn to God or we turn away from God. Only turning to God just doesn't feel genuine, because you know that God is so powerful that he could have rescued that baby. He could have stopped the pain. And because we're afraid to kind of even ask ourselves that, we don't face up to the fact that for reasons that we do not understand at all, no theologian can adequately answer the question, is why does God still allow pain and suffering in this world? If you understand the fall and the fact that God gave us agency, and wouldn't you love to not have your children have choice and agency? I would just love to control my kids completely. And God, in his loving kindness, gave us agency, gave us choice, so that we would actually come back to him in our pain. And we don't understand it. I do not think that when you've lost a baby to SIDS or to disease or anything like that, or I know there's a woman here who lost a teenager. And it was my worst nightmare as a mom. I'd be up late at night until those kids came home safely and they were all tucked in. But you have to ask yourself, why didn't you, God? And here's the deal that actually Elizabeth has taught me better than anybody else. There's grieving, and grieving honestly. But then there's lamenting, and it's different. Lamenting is when in your deepest grief, with all your unanswerable questions, you do it with God. And you invite God into that moment. You invite God into your anger. You invite him into your pain and into your hurt. And you grieve with God. I think if you will just hang on to hope, over time, all those horrified emotions will begin to settle. You will not see the good in it, probably for your entire lifetime. When you begin to let God grieve with you, I think that's when healing begins to come. But it takes a very long time, and it's lonely because everybody's going to want to hurry you up in your grief because it makes people really uncomfortable. But if you can hold on to hope.
Diane and Elizabeth both, in that question, in grief and lament, I think the question I'm trying to ask here is there anything off limits in the way you talk to God in those moments? How truly real can you be in those prayers of grief and those prayers of lament and those prayers of being furious and sad and is there anything off limits? Maybe talk about the prayers of grief and the prayers of lament as both of you have gone through those situations.
Your question, is there anything off limits? I think if you're doing it with God, there's nothing that's off limits because he knows everything already. He knows the parts that are just deeply hurting and broken. He knows the parts that are ugly. He knows the parts that are angry, the parts that are scared. And that is the gift of lament because we're doing it with God, to God, for us, all together. And I think when you read the Psalms and we watch the way David did it, he was brutally honest. He said things to God that we would feel like, am I allowed to say that? And yet he almost every Psalm, not all of them, but almost every single one, he ends with praising God in some sort of way. And I think that tells us something, that when we do it with God in raw honesty, we don't have to have the expectation that after we do it, we're going to be free and feel fine and we're going to be praising Jesus. But that is what comes over time. But the problem is that most of the time we're not fully honest. We shrink back a little bit. We feel like we can't say it, or we feel really lonely in our grief and we don't actually have even people that we can be honest with. So we kind of tamp some of it down and we end up just angry at God because we're not doing it with him. And so I think there's a lot of freedom, and there's a lot of freedom if it takes a long time. And I think that the heart posture, though, is important. And I think of, that story in the Gospels where the man said, God, I believe. I think it was healing his daughter. He said, I believe, help my unbelief. And I think it's that heart posture right there. And even if you can't say that you believe that God is good and that he has a hopeful future for you, if you can say I want to believe that you are good and there's a hopeful future. Just start there. I want to believe that. Yeah. Please help my unbelief because I can't see it right now. I can't feel it right now. Often we're looking for a feeling. And sometimes God gives us those, and sometimes we don't feel it. Sometimes it is just, I'm going to choose to be faithful, like we talked about last night. Yeah.
Yeah,
that answers
yeah,
your
that's
question.
great. This, Phil, you may disagree with this person's stance on it. I was talking with a very deep thinker, Christian thinker, philosopher, whose name all of you would know if I were to say it. And he talked about the different parts of his prayer life, and it's praise and it's all that kind of stuff. But he said in his Lamentations, he said I don't use profanity in everyday life. He goes, the only context I use profanity is in my prayers of lamentations, which was wow. And it. Phil doesn't like it. I knew you wouldn't.
Squirming in his chair.
I knew you wouldn't. So he'll say, gosh darn it. He will. He'll go there. No, so gosh darn it works? Okay. And I'm sorry, we'll have to edit that, I guess,
Did you
right?
know that the F word in their house was fart?
Oh, easy there.
Yeah, I'm just
easy,
saying.
bro. Gosh. Earmuffs, bud. Goodness gracious.
Our kids can't say it at their house.
It's a family podcast.
I'm just trying to give you some context.
Yeah, Brooke,
here,
it's a
guys.
family podcast. Yeah, okay, so Phil disagrees. We're going to have to cut all of that. Yeah, let no unwholesome word.
Yeah.
There you go. Let no unwholesome word.
Move us quickly, Joey.
Woo, let's move on.
Get us out of this rut.
I knew I was waiting. And what am I doing here? I want to go back to Elizabeth here. Elizabeth, question is, how can I? I love this question. This is so good. I know it's from sincere heart, but I hear the woman's frustration here. How can I encourage my husband when it feels like there's not much that I want to be genuine about to encourage? Like yes, yeah. How can I encourage my husband when it feels like there's not much that I want to be genuine about? Yeah, she wouldn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So when you
Can you cover your ears?
So
I have to say something. It's one thing
Of
to
course
sit in
you
a
do.
room. Yeah, of course. It's one thing to sit in a room and do this. It is so different sitting with all of you and doing this. All right. I'm just saying I can talk to these guys about anything, but this is very exposing. Keep going.
I'm gonna ask the question again as I'm reading it, and I actually want to question the premise of the question. It says, "How do I encourage my husband when I don't feel genuine about encouraging him?" So my question is encouragement the move there? You know what I mean? It sounds like there's some deeper work behind that before you can get to encouragement. Possibly. I mean, there's some things you need to do in a marriage, but is when you don't want to. So two questions. One, how do you encourage when you don't feel like there's anything worth encouraging? And then secondly, what are some things maybe leading up to that where you could get to that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to answer the second part of the question first. The word resentment comes to mind, also a deep struggle of mine. Brooke says, tell me more. He knows this. And oftentimes when I'm struggling to find specific things to be able to encourage, there's a lot of resentment that's built up. I also like peace. I don't love conflict. Those two, resentment and wanting peace, often go hand in hand. So oftentimes I will find myself avoiding the things that I need to be able to say for us to really be able to work out so that I'm not filled with resentment, but I'm avoiding them because I want peace. So I think that might be your first question is, where is there lingering resentment that I need to work through with God first, be able to name, and then ask God, what do I need to actually talk to him about? But I also understand being entirely truthful and authentic is very important to me. And I have a very hard time even just getting the words out of my mouth if the encouragement or the compliment isn't 100% genuine. And Brooke has actually taught me a lot in this. I remember one time there was a friend of mine who I knew needed my encouragement, but I didn't feel like I had specific words around the thing that she wanted encouragement for, the whole story there. And I was asking him, like, I don't really know what to say. I feel like I need to acknowledge this thing, but I want to be truthful. And he just said to me, well, what can you encourage? Can you look for just one thing about her, about the work that she's doing that you can encourage, and can you highlight that? And that was years ago. That has really stuck with me, even with him, of like, what is one thing amongst all the things that maybe I'm wrestling with that I need to talk to him about? There's got to be one thing that your husband is doing well. I mean, really. It could be that he hugs your daughter. Name that thing. You're affectionate with your daughter. What a gift you are giving her. It could be that he faithfully goes to work every day. then lean in on you provide for our family. You get up every day and you go to work. Like, start small. It doesn't have to be this long, big, the Spirit gave you a word for him type of thing. It's the little moments that I am so quick to miss and are so, so important. So I think asking God, can you just show me one thing? Or even remembering back to, what did you love about him years ago? What was the one thing? Likely he still has that quality, maybe clouded by a few others because you now know him a lot better. But look for that one thing.
I'm curious, Phil, from a male perspective, will you tell us what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that word of affirmation, that word of encouragement that you get from Diane?
Well, it's like what you said already. I'm going to quote the great Joey, is that you want to rise up and be that person. It's like we tell you with your kids, your children will become who you tell them you see them becoming. So you look for these moments in your children. Like, hey, I saw how you really wanted to slap your sister, but you didn't do it. I'm so proud of you. That's called self-control. And, actually, that's a fruit of the Spirit. Let's talk about God and how he could give you that. That's what you do, right? But since I have the microphone, can I answer that question too? Hope seems to be the hold on to hope. So, I love 1 Corinthians 13. Many of you had it read at your wedding. When I perform weddings, I always read it. And what I like to say is, because God is love and because Jesus is God, in 1 Corinthians 13, you can replace the word love with Jesus. So, love is patient, love is kind. Jesus is patient, Jesus is kind. And there's a line in there that love keeps no record of wrongs. So this question, there's a record of wrongs, because I can't even think of anything good to say because And I think that's the challenge. And Jesus told us to take the log out of our own eye so we can take the speck out of someone else's eye. And I'm very guilty of that. I can be very judgmental. And the older I get, the more I realize, man, I should be way beyond this by now and be loving. But for 1 Corinthians 13, I've done a study on it. I love it. I've preached a sermon on it, and I studied every single word. And at the end, after it goes, love is patient, kind, it goes on, and then it says, love hopes all things, believes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. So there's a time to endure. But the hope there, if you study it, the Greek word there, it's hopelessly optimistic. There's always hope. So I graduated from San Jose State University in 1975. And is there a San Jose State person? Oh, come meet me afterwards. Yeah.
Is that a shark?
Anyway,
San Jose?
wherever I move, they find me. And they send fundraisers. I'm 74 years old. I've never given them a dime. I will never give them a dime. But they are hopelessly optimistic. So, do you remember your college days? I go, yeah, it was horrible. And they're hopeless. But I think we need to be hopelessly optimistic. There are so many beautiful things about her. And I just need to treasure those. Okay, there's my answer.
Phil, you should I would love this. In your will, please leave them a dime.
I will not.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
If it's a dime, it will be divided by 4. 2.5 cents for you. It's like,
I want to ask real quick, Brooke. I want to ask you that same question. When would you answer it any differently than Elizabeth did? When you don't feel like there's something to encourage, how do you encourage her when you don't feel like there's something to encourage? That may be totally moot. Would you answer it any differently?
I think she's very right. I think it depends on your disposition. I do not have a problem verbalizing what I see. And so it's not really, I have plenty of other weaknesses. And if you're curious, she has a Rolodex. She could give them to you. They're real. She doesn't hold them over me, but she knows. But I would say that's true. If I see something, a day doesn't go by where I don't say, you're gorgeous, because I really think that. And I can't not say that. So it's a little bit different. So I'd say be gracious about your disposition. Everyone's going to be different. Some people are going to have a hard time looking for affirmation, and other people, it comes naturally.
Yeah.
So I'd say
that's
lean
great.
into that.
I want to switch over to the topic of envy. And Diane, can I start with you on this when it comes to envy? And maybe even through, envy shows up in a lot of ways. And I'm curious, maybe through your experience, through your hearing, if that was something that ever popped up on envy of seeing other people, and it could be in other areas, but that could be one area. But how do you stop looking with envy? And the question is, how do you cut the deadly loop of envy?
Okay, I love this question. Because I think every woman struggles with envy. Even if we don't name it as that, it's that continual kind of conversation in your head saying, I should be more like her. I should look more like her. I should be skinnier. I should be this, this, this. It's constant loop in our heads. And I think envy is best replaced by valuing who God made you to be. It's kind of my life message, you know. Who are you? Who did he make you uniquely to be? Because the person you're envying, God made them to be uniquely that person, and we can admire them and we can value them and love them and be drawn to them without having to be that person. Because, like I talked about the other night, we are made to reflect different facets of God. You know, it's like your diamond ring, my wedding dining. It's got all sorts of chips around it to make it reflect the light. And we're each kind of like one of those chips, and we reflect certain things about him. And we need to be asking God, one of my other favorite questions, my favorite questions is, God, what is this about? What's going on inside of me? But there's another favorite question that I discovered just a few years ago that I wish we would all begin asking. What is it about me in particular, Jesus, that you love? That is the best question. And he begins to trickle down. He begins to tell you what it is about you that he specifically loves. And it just wipes out envy. It makes you just really value all these people who are different facets of that diamond. What is it about me specifically that you really like and that you really love?
I love that so much, and I will say that exploration of what's unique about yourself is a very hard one, and I believe because everybody in here has a superpower, something they're wonderful at, but because it comes naturally to you, you think it comes naturally to everyone. So it's hard to value that inside yourself because you just assume that everybody's good at that thing, right? And so it does take some deep exploration. It does take you really digging into the Holy Spirit and asking that question. I love that you said it's just asking that question, what is it, God, about me? And so you're able to do that. I'm curious for the rest of the group, when it comes to envy, do you think that males and females feel envy at different levels? Or do you think that it's easier for guys and it's harder for women? Do you think and then how do you think that men and women may handle envy differently?
The first thing I just comes to mind right away is I think it looks very different. I think what we envy is very different. I think for men, it's easy to be envious of the capacity, what would be a good way to say it? Envious of their, maybe it's positional. It's not as personal, maybe with, and again, I think we should stay away from generalizations, but for certain folks, I think it's very, very specific. Like some people might be envying a type or a version of this person or a body or an opportunity. I think with men a little bit, what I see is more global. It's not necessarily always just a specific, it's more global of like their person, their job, their life. But I think as humans, that's the thing of our time. It's just looking at somebody else's life, admiring it, and thinking your life has very little to no value because someone else's might have a lot. Jerry Sitzer, who's one of my favorites, he's on the podcast before. I a while ago asked him, I said, you don't have to be my mentor because I don't want to put pressure on you, but can I call you whenever I need stuff and just talk? And he's like, yes, Brooke. Yes, you can. So I call him, every now and then, and we talk about everything. And he just said, Brooke, you have to remember something. In the world, or in the actual way that the world works, not the kingdom, but the world, he said, if someone else has good, it takes away from the good that's available in the world. So that would mean that if this woman has something else that you don't, then you're never going to get it. But he said, you have to remember in the kingdom, it's all about multiplication. It's all about good. If you put good in the kingdom, that actually enhances the other person's good. There's more good to have in the kingdom. And so he just explained, he's like, when someone does something great, fill in the blank, a job, a book, or whatever, it doesn't take away from you. It actually adds to the experience of the kingdom. And it was just the most unlocking, helpful thing to go, no, we all have our job. And when we're in the kingdom, it's multiplication, it's not subtraction. And that was a huge gift.
I want to throw an encouragement on here around the idea of encouragement. So our friend Justin Whitmell Early talks about the concept of rebuke and encouragement and the power of words. And in encouragement, this is the best definition I've ever heard of encouragement. Encouragement is pointing out something in somebody else that they should continue to do. Period.
Yeah.
So the way that I would encourage this group to make encouragement such a part of your daily life. And if you begin to point those things out, because it's going to be a lot easier, Diane, to your point of seeing those things in yourself as you begin to hear those things, and you can begin sowing those seeds in other people of just saying those things that they're doing well. You should keep doing this. And implied in that, and here's what I love on encouragement too, if you don't encourage, there's a chance that person will stop doing that good thing. So you have such an amazing power here, right?
Sure.
For them to continue doing that great thing that they may otherwise quit. And as a result, you're going to begin, as you build that culture, it will still begin coming back to you. Let me move on to the next question. This is for Brooke and Elizabeth. What's the best way to come alongside moms who are struggling but aren't in a place to ask for help? So, and I actually I know we're not asked this person this question, but why would a mom not be in a place to ask for help? I need some help as a thick-headed male understanding. Why would a woman not ask for help?
Well, Joey.
So many different reasons, I think, depending on your wiring. But maybe something that will hit everybody in the room and everybody listening. We're kind of conditioned as moms not to ask for help. We're told that what we're doing really, really matters, right? Moms are important. Every football player who wins what's the big game? Super Bowl.
What's the name?
Super Bowl, that's what it's called. Yeah. They thank their mom, right? But our culture does little to nothing to actually support moms. You have a baby, you go right back to work. Although now there's this thing called paternity leave. We did not have that at all. But so it's the air we breathe. We're praised for being super mom, right? We're praised for being able to do it all without help. And so we have been fed that since we were really young. So that, I think, is a reason most moms don't ask for help. Or there's so many different reasons that could be in there. We've asked for help and people didn't show up, or maybe we were conditioned by our family of origin that you needed to just do it on your own, whatever it might be. But I think we as moms, no matter where it's coming from or your wiring, we need people to help us understand that asking for help is not weakness, and it's actually a gift for the other person who's offering the help. I'm still trying to let that sink in. And for so much of my adult life, it was so hard for me to ask for help. Not actually because I didn't think I needed it. I knew that I desperately needed it. I wanted people to offer it. But I have this fear of inconveniencing people, of being too much, basically, of being too needy. Comes from just lies of the enemy from when I was a kid. And so for me, I don't ask for help because I'm just so terrified of inconveniencing somebody. And so for me to get up the courage to ask for help takes a lot. So I think when we're offering to help moms, we've got to be real direct and a little bit forceful. And just say, hey, I would like to do this thing for you. If it's somebody needs a meal or somebody needs you to watch one of their kids, for the person who's offering the help to be able to say, I would like to do this specific thing for you. At this time, does that work for you? That's incredibly helpful. Or to send a list of here's the 3 things I could do. Any of those things helpful for you? But to be real specific, because when you ask a mom, hey, let me know if you need anything, we're not gonna let you know that we need something. It's very unlikely that we're going to. And for those that need help, and maybe you've gotten the courage to ask for help, Sally, I think it was you who told me this. Don't be discouraged if the answer's no. Don't let that be the thing that makes you never ask again, because we're all human and we also need to learn to be able to say no if we don't have capacity for it, right? But don't let that discourage you from asking somebody else for help. I think sometimes we take it really personal, or I don't know if anybody can relate to this. I just hope that everybody notices that I need help. right? But not actually asking for the specifics.
But will you give a couple instances where you talk about being forceful and saying like in mandating on the person that they need help? What are maybe a couple of signs for you where you'd know like, oh, this is an inflection point where obviously they're going to need some help? Like postpartum's a very easy one. So what would be some of those moments for those of us who want to look for opportunities to mandate help on somebody else? What are a couple of inflection points that could be like little signals?
I want to respond. Okay. I want to respond to this because I see her do this all the time.
Okay.
So Elizabeth's a great friend. If you're a friend with Elizabeth, she's a good friend. Any friends in the room? She's a great friend. She's like, there's two of them because she's an introvert. She's an introvert, like real deep. They're deep, not wide, all right? We all know this. She's a great friend. And I think one of the things that I learned from her, because I don't care to help people, not like she does. I'm like, I'll help, but if it's like inconvenience, like I'm out.
Well,
yeah, I'm not gonna I don't wanna like inconvenience my schedule for this person. But hey, this is real, all right? This is real. I think one thing I see her do all the time is she's close enough with her friends that she knows when they need something. So she's constantly saying things like, hey, maybe we should offer to help with this. Or, our dear friends, the Pilatas, they have 4 kids. The youngest one's Sienna. We have 2 little girls. And she's like, maybe I should see if Sienna can play because I think Nicole's had a really long week and I think she just would probably love an afternoon. Like, she's got to know her to actually offer that, right? Like she has to be so involved. And so I would just say what I see her doing, and this is maybe you have an extra response, but I just want to praise you for that, but also say that I think I learned a lot from her in that she's close enough to know that it doesn't have to be forceful or not. She's just in and out where she goes like, oh, I know she's going to need this. And then she just offers help before the person has to ask. So.
I love that. I want to go. A lot of us are thinking down the road. What does our future look like? What's the legacy that we're building right now? The foundation we're building right now. So Phil and Diane, I want to come to you. Your kids love Jesus, and I mean, what a legacy you have. Will you talk to us a little bit about that foundation that you built? If you were looking at Phil and Diane Comer sitting in the audience, 30 years ago, whatever that is. What do you think you did well? What is the encouragement you would need well so that as your kids grow older, that they will continue to love Jesus?
You know our story that we didn't grow up in Jesus following homes. So I think a couple of things. One is we knew that we didn't know anything. And there's something about being first generation Christians that is just fresh and raw, and our faith was really fresh and raw. And we were still learning when our kids were very young. We were still learning what it even really meant to follow Jesus in every area of our lives. And there's almost an advantage, I think, to that. I always envied the people from, this Christian home and this Christian heritage. And I'm finding out that sometimes the faith of one generation that was culturally relevant to that generation doesn't always translate well to the culture, especially in between our generation and your generation. Changes have happened so much so fast that some of the things that we said and that we did that made total sense in the 80s and 90s now just feel like, fingers on a chalkboard to the generation living in the culture that we have, that we're in right now. But I think the main thing that for us was that God was so gracious. He was still breaking of us of our self-sufficiency and our pride and our tendency to want pat answers when our kids were little. And so one of the greatest things that God did for me, I look back, I was always praying, God, I want my kids, I want them not to experience life the way I did. I don't want them to know the darkness that I knew before Christ. And would you just make my kids love the Lord their God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength? And I think in his kindness, my struggle when most of you know my story, my struggle when I was diagnosed at 26 years old that I was going deaf, and the way I in raw, horrible honesty, turned away from God, and then how he rescued me, his story of rescuing me, changed a major shift in the way I viewed God and the way I viewed being a follower of God. And now I look back and I think our kids are all super smart, super question askers. Why? You know, John Mark is challenging every single thought ever before in Christendom, you know, and evaluating it. Is it really here in the scriptures, or did we just make that up? They're all like that. Every one of them are like that. And I think the faith that I held on to, which was a rule-oriented, be a good girl, do it right, wear the right things, say the right things, don't do this, don't do that, they would have rejected my faith.
Wow.
And so we broke down my faith so it became a real, completely dependent faith. They saw that, and I think that was a faith that they could say, okay, that one makes sense to me. So I think it was all about God and him doing us, me crying out, Phil crying out, I want my kids to follow Jesus. And God saying, okay, okay, I'll do, first I have to fix you.
So good.
And your strange faith that you've adopted with all sorts of weird, you know, rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
And once I fix that, then maybe you will be able to incarnate Christ in your home.
Phil, what about you? What was in building that foundation that led to kids who love Jesus?
I'd answer that question differently. I agree with everything you said, though, from a different perspective.
He's well trained, boy. I'll tell you, that was good. That was good.
There's never any conflict or differences in our home, as you can kind of probably tell, right?
Because we were first-generation Christians saved in the Jesus movement. We always believed in God. We knew he was love. We had no clue who Jesus was. He changed our life. And so from the get-go, I thought if my kids don't grow up to love and follow Jesus, what am I doing? I was a young pastor. I said, I'm not going to be a pastor, because if it's not working in your own home, don't export it. So that's why in 1 Timothy 3, elders have to be, you know, they're supposed to be an example. They're not perfect, but they need to be an example. They must be those who manage their own household well. So let's try to give a picture of the church. This is kind of what a healthy marriage looks like. This is kind of what a healthy home looks like. So that was our greatest passion. So the foundation is Jesus. I mean, he says at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice, you know, when the storm comes, the foundation will be there, okay? Otherwise, it's going to be washed away. So Jesus was the foundation. So don't ever apologize for that. It's Jesus, Jesus. I'm loving that every song is Jesus. You can't get enough of Jesus. There's a girl here, Sarah. I call her Sarah, from Las Vegas. She showed up at our church when we were in a school starting off, and I don't remember this. She goes, I walked in and you were up front and you held up your Bible. I go, well, that was this Bible. She said, you said, if you're visiting a church and they're not teaching from this book, leave. And so I don't remember saying that. But like, I look back, I wish we'd read more scripture. I wish we'd memorized more verses. I wish we read a chapter before dinner. So as you can just, and as long as you're living it out, values are caught more than they're taught. All they need to see is, man, I don't know, my dad, you know, he loses his temper once in a while, but then I see him apologize. You know, like, but what did Duke say the other day? Well, Dad, whatever it is, Phil's dad or Pops is going to bring Jesus into it. You know, so it's like, well, of course I will. Like the profanity thing, of course not, because the Bible says, whatever. So I think don't. Of course not. Like that's sin. Okay, so.
By the way, this is not a shot at me.
I don't know who this guy is. He's probably good, but anyway, but not that.
Yeah. His initials are JMC.
I guess what I'm saying is, be all in. Your kids will survive that they didn't get to do whatever, but all their friends did. Like, you know, don't worry about it. Just say, you know, in this home we honor the Lord Jesus Christ, and make it fun. And I think that's the foundation. If your kids they'll smell phoniness really fast. Yeah. So if they see an authentic walk with God, and I think children, that's why, you know, I love that we never thought we'd be doing this at this stage and age, but now that I'm realizing that, I'm kind of rambling here, but I just heard George Barna speak, you know, the great George Barna with all these studies, and he said really the only hope for America now is children, because the rest of the world has not a biblical worldview. And for them to come to Christ, they've got to rethink, oh, my whole worldview is wrong, and now I've got to come to a worldview. And many Christians don't have a biblical worldview, And so, but children, they're open, and God created them to hear the story. And so between the age of 4 and 14, almost everyone will make their decision to follow the Lord or not. And so I think that that's why the home is so important. And so I just think you need to realize, wow. And one more verse, and I'll shut up. Okay, so Isaiah 8:18, I forgot about this verse. God gave it to us when we were told by John Mark and the elders to put a ministry together to help parents. It's not a children's ministry, it's a parenting ministry. And I came across this verse in Isaiah where God says to Isaiah, I think it's 8:18, I and the children the Lord has given me are for signs and wonders in Israel. And I would just remind you, the children, I think it was Brooke who said, they're not yours, they're God's, because the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, Psalm 24:1. So we all belong to God, everything belongs to God, He owns it all. And your children belong to Him, but they're given to you for a time. And so they've been given to you for signs and wonders so you could shoot them out into the world to bring hope and help and things that you will never be able to bring because you're not them. Yeah. And so I think, wow, what a privilege. So when I look at my home that way, that's the foundation I want to lay.
I love that.
So, my parents had a lot of faults, but, one thing is they loved the Lord.
Yeah, that's it.
And I saw how He changed their life, and they told me about Him. And I just think, don't ever be afraid of talking to your kids when they're little. And if you think they're ready to receive the Lord, say, well, a 5-year-old can't understand that. Yes, they can at a 5-year-old level. And then you keep reminding them and reminding them, hey, remember when we were over by the Christmas tree that time? And remember what happened? Well, and now, and you just keep reminding them. And then, yes, when they're older, they're going to have to decide for themselves. But that faith seed will never go away.
That's good. That's a foundation. That's good. That'll preach. I will. We are going to go over time, Brooke. So don't be a jerk about it. Okay, gosh. I will. I've read, Phil, to your point there, that as people continue to leave the church, the kids who are not leaving the church, the tie-in there of the people who aren't leaving the church is scripture memory, and that's interesting. Getting that word deep in their heart from a very young age. So let's. I want to encourage everybody with that. Get that deep in their heart. Just as a clarification, it was not John Mark who said the swearing thing. I just want to clarify that. It was not him. But before I have a last question that none of you know, but I do want to share just a very, very quick story. When I was 14 years old, I went to a revival in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a minister by the name of Luis Palau. And it was something that was impactful on me. I still remember it 30 years ago. I learned last night that the worship leader at that revival was Phil Comer. How neat is that?
That's cool.
So neat. It's very, and then I know we have a bunch of tie-ins. What a neat story. So here's a question that's going to be a little bit difficult, and it's for each of you. I'm going to go in order. I want to know one thing that you love about your spouse. One thing you love about your spouse. And while you're thinking of it, it will take a second. I'm going to tell you what I love about my wife, Kristen. One, Kristen, you may have noticed I do have a lot of body. I'm a little taller. My wife is my sweet little wife, claims 5 feet tall, but she's about 4'11" and 3/4. She's just a little nugget, and I've put her right in here in that front pocket of mine. I just keep her in my front pocket. She's wonderful. Even though I'm the Joey, I keep her in my pouch, right? Yeah. So thank you.
That was good.
Thank you.
Slow down and listen. Hear what he said. That was good. Stand up is in your next career, bro. That was funny.
My sweet Kristen is a fountain of wisdom. And wisdom, as Andy Stanley defines it, wisdom is the recognition that everything in life is connected. And I believe that moms have an amazing ability to connect everything. You say, hey, what are we doing next Thursday? And then you get 70 implications for what would happen next Thursday. Kristen is, in a good way, Kristen's mind is so active. She is such a well of wisdom. Whenever I have any difficult question, I come to her because I know that she's going to connect all the implications of that, and she's going to do it in a spirit-led way. So that's what I love about Kristen. So my charge for you is top that, buddy.
I'm not even going to compete. I don't have the whole pouch thing. I do have a pouch on my sweatshirt here. I got no jokes. So something we do every birthday is we sit around and we tell the person's whoever's birthday it is what we love about them. And this is a beautiful thing. Our kids hate it. Your kids would hate it too. They also love it and they need it. And the person hates it or the adult hates it, but you also love it. It's like, this is coming. I don't want it, but I want it so bad. And it's just the truth. But, you do this year after year and you're like, you can't repeat stuff. You actually have to be like, I can't be like, well, I really like this about you. So what I'll say is what I like right now, because there's a lot of things I love about you. I would say your sweetness. I love your sweetness. You have a sweetness that our daughters carry in like this beautiful way. Gosh, I can't cry again. Your sweetness is one of them. And I also just love how you've grown. Like, you have a calling on your life. We have a calling together, right? I have a calling, you have a calling, but we have one together, but you have your own. And you stepped into it like a boss. Do you understand? Like, she doesn't usually speak in front of people, and she just does that here. It's really frustrating if you've been communicating for like 15 years, and then your wife does the same thing. She's like far superior. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But I've just loved to see you. I've loved how you've stepped into this new call, and I've loved how you've been really obeying Jesus. And then also, well, there's so many, last thing, you are so often silently suffering and you hold it with such grace. That's a daily thing that you and I have to work through, but at the very same time, you do it with such grace. And I love that about you.
Okay, you did top it.
She's here.
Oh, thank you. I love the way you frame that, what we love about each other right now. Yeah. This is going to sound weird.
Come on. Just one nice thing.
No, it's nice.
I'm so excited.
It's just not fluffy. I told you this is going to sound weird. I prefaced it with that. Your faithfulness to pain. You don't like pain. You don't like discomfort. Nobody does, but some people dislike it more. Yeah. And yet you've had a lot of pain in your life, in the past and in the present, or surrounded by people who are experiencing pain. And your dedication to grow and to change has been a painful one. And you've stayed so faithful to it. And I feel like watching you over the last 10 years, because that's how long it's been, where we're like, nope, I'm stepping into this part of my story. I feel like there's been fruit all along, but it feels like 10 years in, I'm getting to see the immense fruit of you saying, no, I'm going to do this as much as I don't really want to grow in self-awareness, to grow in learning my own story and in what Jesus can do with that. And what you have to offer people because of that, because of the last 10 years that I've gotten to see behind the scenes, the years of obscurity, the years of you wrestling your calling, trying to figure out what in the world you were made to do, all while just staying faithful to Jesus and letting him heal your pain, has been just a beautiful thing to get to watch and observe. And I know that I have not always done it graciously. I've done it critically a lot of the times. But I'm really thankful that you didn't give up. Yeah, that'd be all.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I know.
Beautiful. Okay. So I have 46 years of things to be able to talk about. I could be here all night, but I'll tell you the first thing that I fell in love with Phil is that he is so encouraging. There's not even any hesitancy. Any of you who know him at all for a few minutes, he spotted who you are, and he'll put his hand on your shoulder and he'll look you in the eye. And I get it every day. He just oozes encouragement, not compliments, encouragement. And he tells me I'm beautiful all the time. I was 9 months pregnant. Oh, you're so beautiful. I'm wrinkled and gravity is taking its toll. Oh, Di, you're so beautiful. I just love that it just oozes. He sees me through the eyes of just beauty. And I really love that always you've led me and our whole family to follow Jesus. Bottom line, That's who we are. Not expectations, what we'll do with our life, or that we'll get everything right, ever. But we just follow Jesus. This is who we are. And has changed my life. Keeps changing my life. So I have to be quiet.
This is kind of embarrassing. It's like some of you are crying. It's like
These are called emotions. They're good.
this morning she came out. We have Sunday, our granddaughter's sleeping on a blow-up bed in Diane's office, and Matt and Simone are here, so the baby's in a crib in my office, and so we're all moving around for our times with the Lord. So I'm sitting out in the library, and Diane came in and just sweetly leaned over to me to thank me for how she's felt me, because I'm not doing much here except being proud of all of you and all of them. And I just look, and you saw Diane, she wants you all to be her daughter. She loves you. And so she just tenderly, sees that I've been trying to help her and watch over her. And so I said back to her, it's been a joy for me, but she couldn't hear me, right? So she goes, what? And so, because she's unplugged, right? So she doesn't plug in until she has to. So I had to say it again, and she got it. But so I do try to encourage her. But it's pretty hard to say. You said one thing. Nobody's doing one thing, dude. True. So I'll do one thing, because I obey rules sometimes. Okay. The one thing I love. Well, I'm gonna have to say two. So Diane jokingly says, everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody writes all these books on leadership. She goes, I am a good follower. and I told her, you should write a book on a good follower, because every pastor needs people that will follow. This is where the Lord wants to go. Yeah, let's go, And so she is a good follower. So, she used to get a little upset with me, because when we're going to go out to dinner as a family, I'm okay, where do you want to go, guys? You want to go to Chili's? Or, and nobody ever agreed, right? So she would just make a decision, because she'll go wherever. And she's always been the first one to say, great, and I'm the opinionated one. So really what that is it's not about me. It's, I want to go where you want to go, everybody else wants to go. And then the other thing is her loyal devotion, which is, by the way, the Hebrew word translated faithfulness, hesed. It's loyal devotion. She believes the best about people. Whenever I say, that guy, I think he needs to, and that might be true, but she doesn't even go there with her head. She first goes to love and optimism, and that's such a blessing to me. So she is like the Lord in that way, who doesn't look at you for everything that needs to be corrected right now. He loves you. You're his daughter, your beloved daughter, and sure, he's going to help you work on the things that are going to make you more beautiful, but he loves you as you are, and she is that to me. She loves me as I am, but she also knows what to say to me periodically to help me become what I should be. So I guess I'm saying her genuine love, it's a genuine love she has for me, and a loyal devotion. That's it.
I'll tell you what jumped out to me, and Diane, as you were talking, I was crying, because everybody wants what you have, but it's hard to get there. There are moments where you're just gonna maybe be on the verge of hating your spouse, and it's gonna feel monotonous, and you're gonna go through what feels like hell on earth, and you're gonna go through pains and trials, and it's by persevering. So my encouragement to all of you and everybody listening is it's through the persevering and just clinging to Jesus in the meantime, and persevering and pushing through. We never want to. We feel like it's gonna be easier to throw in the towel, but then what we want is what you have. And I want to tell the four of you, you encourage me, and I love you. Do you love them? Does anybody love them? Thank you all. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for letting me be a little part of this.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you all for being a part of the first live podcast ever. Yes, we did it.